Have you ever wondered if the person you're waiting for might never show up, but the person you need is already standing right in front of you? The cold wind howled through the streets of Boston that December night, carrying with it the scent of snow and something heavier, the weight of unfinished goodbyes. Inside a small bookstore cafe tucked between two brownstones, surrounded by the warm glow of Edison bulbs and the gentle murmur of indie folk music, sat Daniel Harris, a man whose green eyes, though once full of ambition, now held only shadows. Before him sat a cup of Earl Grey tea, growing cold, forgotten, while his attention remained locked on the frosted window where snowflakes danced like memories refusing to settle. The chair opposite him had been vacant for 8 months now. Every Thursday night, the same ritual, the same silence. "I thought she meant it," he whispered into the emptiness, the words barely audible over the soft acoustic guitar playing through the speakers. If you've ever held on to hope when everyone told you to let go, if you believe that sometimes the universe breaks us just to rebuild us stronger, then stay with me. Because what unfolded next will show you that the love we truly need doesn't always arrive in the package we expected. Daniel had been someone who once believed in certainty. Hard work, dedication, loyalty, the promise that if you gave your all, life would give back. 3 years ago, he was climbing the ladder at a tech startup in Cambridge, known for his innovative thinking, his easy charm, and his unshakable optimism. But beneath the surface of his successful life, everything was crumbling in slow motion. He'd been holding on to someone who promised forever but delivered only fragments. Her name was Jessica. They'd crossed paths 3 winters earlier in this very bookstore cafe where he now returned every Thursday evening like a ghost haunting his own life. She was a photographer, wild, unpredictable, full of fire and spontaneity. She'd painted his structured world with chaos and possibility. But the universe, as it tends to do, showed its cruelty without mercy. One snowy evening, almost identical to this one, Jessica had sent him a text message, her words brief and devastating. She wrote that she needed space, something about finding herself, something about timing being wrong. Then she added that she'd come back when she figured things out. Daniel waited at their usual table that evening. The hours passed. She never walked through that door. And every single week after, he returned to that exact seat, ordering his tea and watching the snow fall, clinging to the belief that perhaps this would be the night she'd remember her promise. He became someone frozen in yesterday, existing but not truly living. The world around him kept spinning. Promotions came and went. Colleagues celebrated milestones. Friends moved forward. But inside his chest, he remained trapped in that moment when she chose to leave. Tonight, though, something felt different in the air. The snow fell harder, thicker. The bookstore was strangely quiet, and for reasons beyond his understanding, his breathing felt heavier than it had in weeks. The owner, a gentle elderly man named Thomas, refilled his teacup without asking. "Still holding out for her, son?" he asked with kind eyes. Daniel forced a weak smile. "Old habits are hard to break, I suppose, but destiny, that invisible weaver of our most unexpected blessings, was about to intervene." As his eyes drifted back toward the window, something caught his attention, or rather someone. A young woman stood outside in the blizzard, soaked through despite her thin jacket, her dark hair plastered against her face. Her expression was one of quiet desperation, lips quivering from the bitter cold. In one hand, she gripped a torn backpack, and beside her stood a small boy, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, bundled in an oversized blue coat and holding tight to a worn teddy bear. The woman was clearly fighting back tears, attempting to stay strong for the child beside her. But her eyes gave her away, bloodshot, exhausted, defeated. Something about the image cut straight through Daniel's protective walls. The sight of someone so visibly broken standing alone in a snowstorm awakened something dormant inside him. Before he could think it through, he was on his feet, moving closer to the glass. The woman's eyes lifted at that exact moment, locking with his for a heartbeat. And in that fraction of a second, something wordless traveled between them, recognition. The recognition of shared suffering. Thomas noticed as well. "Goodness," he murmured quietly. "She's been out there for nearly 15 minutes. probably waiting for a ride that isn't coming. Daniel felt something shift inside him. For 8 months, he'd been the one waiting for someone who vanished. Maybe it was time to stop being paralyzed by his own pain and acknowledge the struggles happening right outside his window. He grabbed his coat and pushed through the door into the freezing night. The snow stung his face immediately, but he pushed forward. "Excuse me," he called out gently as he approached them. "You two shouldn't be standing out here in this storm." The woman flinched slightly, wiping at her face quickly. "I apologize for the intrusion. We're managing. We were only trying to find somewhere to." Daniel saw how the little boy peered up at him, curious yet wary, his small hand gripping his mother's tighter. "There's warmth inside," he said softly, "and they make incredible hot apple cider." She looked torn. Dignity and desperation warred across her features. But then the little boy tugged her sleeve gently and said, "Mama, I'm really cold." So they followed him back inside. Thomas immediately appeared with blankets, and the rich smell of cinnamon and apples soon filled their corner. The boy smiled ever so slightly as he wrapped both hands around the warm mug, his pale cheeks slowly regaining color. The woman, whose name she offered quietly was Claire, thanked him with genuine gratitude in her voice. She appeared to be in her early 30s, but her face carried the kind of weariness that comes from years of fighting invisible battles. Through careful conversation, she shared glimpses of her reality. She'd relocated to Boston just 3 weeks earlier after being laid off from her position in Philadelphia. Her partner had walked out 4 years ago, leaving her to raise their son, Mason, completely alone. The landlord had given her an eviction notice, and she was still desperately searching for stable employment. "I just wanted to make sure he had something warm in his belly tonight," she said, her eyes on Mason. "We were planning to head to the community center once the weather cleared up." Daniel listened, feeling his heart constrict with each revelation. He'd spent so long drowning in his own heartbreak that he'd forgotten how many people carried their burdens in silence, how many fought battles no one ever witnessed. The evenings stretched longer. The bookstore grew quieter. Claire's laughter, tentative and fragile at first, gradually began to mix with Mason's delighted giggles as they played tic-tac-toe on napkins. Daniel found himself genuinely smiling, not the polite mask he'd worn for months, but something real and unguarded. When Claire stood to leave, Daniel stopped her with a gentle touch. "Do you have somewhere warm to stay tonight?" Her hesitation spoke volumes. The center usually has availability. If they're full, we'll figure something out. Everything inside him rebelled against the thought of them walking back into that blizzard. "There's a small inn 3 blocks away," he said quietly. "Please allow me to help you both." She tried to decline, pride flashing in her eyes, but when Mason shivered despite the blanket, she finally accepted with a nod. He walked them through the snow under his large umbrella, the storm gradually quieting to gentle flurries. Before they parted ways at the inn's entrance, Claire turned to face him. "You had absolutely no obligation to do any of this," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "But thank you. This won't be forgotten." That night, as Daniel returned to his empty apartment, something fundamental had shifted within him. The pain of Jessica's absence remained, but it no longer held him hostage. He'd witnessed something authentic again, the fierce resilience of a mother, the innocent faith of a child depending on her. Days melted into weeks. Daniel found himself visiting the bookstore cafe less to wait for a ghost and more to simply exist in the moment, to read, to reflect, to breathe. One Saturday morning, as he walked through the door, Thomas grinned knowingly. "You've got company waiting." At a corner table near the fiction section sat Claire and Mason, both beaming. Mason jumped up immediately, waving a piece of construction paper excitedly. A crayon drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands beneath falling snow. "Mama said we needed to thank you the right way," Mason announced proudly. Claire blushed, her expression warm and sincere. They talked for hours that afternoon. Claire had secured a part-time position at a local library. Money was still incredibly tight, but she said life finally felt like it had direction again. Daniel offered his support wherever possible, not from sympathy, but from something deeper, something he couldn't quite name yet. Throughout the following months, what started as simple kindness gradually transformed into something tender and genuine. Claire brought light back into his existence, not with dramatic intensity like Jessica had, but with steady authenticity and grace. She never made empty promises. She simply appeared consistently every single time. And Mason became the joy in his quiet world, the reason his laughter came naturally again. The boy would create drawings for him, call him Mr. Daniel, and ask infinite questions about dinosaurs, outer space, and why birds fly south in winter. By the following autumn, Daniel no longer sat by that window waiting for Jessica to reappear. Instead, he sat alongside Claire and Mason, sharing tea and cider, watching the changing seasons together. One evening, Claire gazed out at the first snowfall of the new year, remembering that initial night. "You were sitting right over there," she said softly, pointing, "and I was outside completely falling apart." Daniel smiled gently. "You looked like someone who desperately needed to be seen." She met his eyes then, and hers were glistening. Perhaps we both needed that. Outside, the snow began falling again, not harsh or lonely this time, but soft and purifying, like the opening chapter of something beautiful. If the story moved something inside you, please like, comment, and share this video. Let's spread the message that compassion has the power to transform lives in ways we never imagine. And if you believe that second chances sometimes arrive through unexpected strangers, don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one. Before you leave, share with us in the comments, do you think certain people enter our lives for a specific reason, even if it's just for a brief moment in time? As the camera slowly faded on that snowy bookstore window, Daniel's words echoed softly into the winter night. "I thought she meant it, but perhaps someone far better was already on her way." And somewhere in the peaceful rhythm of the falling snow, life whispered its reply. "Your waiting was never without purpose."